We are now streaming.
Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Detweiler. I am the Chief Academic Officer for the Boone County Schools. Tonight, we are having our calendar committee meeting. We are streaming live to the public. This is a public meeting. Calling this meeting to order now. According to my iPhone, it's 5:32, so we'll call the meeting to order 5:32. On this committee, we have representation from the Board of Education, from the teachers, the principals, the classified staff, the parents, and from the business community. So thank you all for being here to help us with this. Many of you have done this before. We appreciate your continued help with this. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of how the process works. Tonight, we will look at one draft calendar. We'll start with the draft calendar as a starting point. But I want to state for the record that everything's on the table. You are the members of the committee. If you see something that you want to change, or if there are other things that you want us to consider, we can do that. I'm quite certain just from the conversation this afternoon that we will require a second meeting. So we'll talk, at least a second meeting. So we'll talk about that later on in this meeting. We will need to present the Board of Education with a first reading of a draft on the December board meeting, which I believe is Thursday the 10th. After that, the BCEA, our Teachers Association, has to ratify the calendar, and then it will come back for a second reading in January to the Board of Education. So that's the process that we will follow. Does anybody have any questions about that before we get started? Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ford. Mr. Ford is the guru of the calendars. How many years have you been doing this, Mr. Ford?
15 years, Dr. Detweiler.
15 years, we appreciate that. So I asked Mr. Ford if he would give us an overview of what the law says we have to include in the calendar. It might be easiest if we put the draft calendar up that we developed as a draft. I'll keep saying that, as a draft. That way he can orient us to the calendar and talk about some of the stipulations and the requirements that we've met in the draft. So Mike, do you want to share your screen?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And does everyone see that?
We can see that. Thank you very much.
Very good. What you see in front of you is a draft calendar, like Dr. Detweiler stated, for the 2021-2022 calendar school year. Within the calendar year, there are certain state statute requirements and board policy contractual requirements that we must meet. This calendar, as presented, does meet all those requirements. First of all, I'll talk about state statute. The minimum number of instructional days that we must have for a school year is 170 student instructional days. This calendar, as you can see on May the 19th, has a number of 172. The other state statute requirement is that the calendar must meet a stipulation of 1,062 instructional hours. The normal school day approved by our Board of Education for Boone County Schools is 6 hours and 15 minutes a day, or 6.25 hours. This calendar exceeds the 1,062 minimum statute requirement by, I believe it's 15 hours. I have my notes right here. Give me just 1 second. I've done the math on this. It's by 13 hours, 1,075 hours. So this calendar does meet both state statutes. The other thing that the calendar must meet is contractual. We must provide 187 days for our teaching staff. And this calendar does just that contractually. We get the 187 days by adding up the following: 172 student instructional days, one opening day, one closing day, 4 holidays, which are Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. And then you'll see 9 yellow boxes, which represent professional days, professional development days, and flex days. Taking all those into consideration, this calendar meets 187 days, which is the contractual obligation for our teaching staff. The state requirement is 185 calendar days for teaching staff. Because contractually we have the 2 flex days. You'll see one in October and one in March, currently identified. Then our teachers have a contractual obligation of 187 days. So as stated, this calendar fulfills all the state statute requirements and policy contractual requirements between Boone County School District and Boone County Education Association. So Dr. Detweiler, there's the explanation of this calendar.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Mike. Any questions about what the requirements are from the committee? Okay, let's talk about some of the elements in this calendar that we looked at when we put together this draft. This draft was put together, just so that you're aware, between myself, Mr. Ford, Mrs. Grimm, and Mrs. Wilson, just in collaboration as a starting point from elements that we heard about that we wanted to consider putting in the calendar. But as I said, if you as a committee have other elements that you wish to add or change, that's what this discussion is all about. You notice right up the front of the calendar, there are some PD days, very similar to what we ended up doing at the beginning of this school year. I'm going to ask Jenny Watson to talk about the teacher survey that kind of indicated that the teachers really appreciated that time at the beginning of the year and why we added these in the draft. Jenny, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, obviously with this year being a very different year, it really made those professional learning days a priority. But having since heard from the teachers directly about that, we felt like it was a valuable asset to consider going forward because of our drive as a district to unify the professional learning mindset, to allow teachers opportunities to learn from each other, also just to secure that mindset of readiness and how hectic the beginning of the year is, and that opportunity for teachers just to kind of be able to breathe a little bit and be completely a solid feeling of readiness that they've never had before. Typically it's been, you know, one PD day, one opening day, and then students come. So just that idea of readiness, our data very much supports that was a needed asset for teachers through the surveys. The other conversation that I had with Bobby Grimm was these PDs are not sit and get days. We envision that these days be shared between maybe 2 days district, 2 days school, but it be similar to the structure this year where there's a menu of options so that there's flexibility for teachers to get those required tasks finished that are state mandated, such as CPR training, several PBIS trainings that the state puts out every year, so that they have time to get that finished that's not feeling rushed. And then 2 of those days be school specific and be more of the needs of what the building level professional learning needs are, perhaps more differentiated professional development for teachers. So just kind of sharing that load with the schools would be kind of our request. Bobby, did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Yes, thank you, Jenny. So again, that's the beginning of the conversation on how those PD days might work. Some of the things we talked about at cabinet with Mr. Turner and Mr. McCarter are that we would divide those PD days with the principals or with the schools. So we might say 2 of those at the beginning would be district items that the teachers need to have before they start the school year. And the other 2 would be building specific that the principals would work with their site-based councils to ensure, very similar to what Jenny described. We're going to come back to that because there are some alternatives to that we want to discuss. But before we do, Bobby, would you mind orienting us to some of the placement of some of the holidays and some of the other things that we added to the calendar? Why we made decisions that we did about X days, et cetera, where they are.
The X days are put into the calendar just for spring break and Christmas break, and then on Martin Luther King Day, because that is, the Martin Luther King is required by the state that we have that day off. The other thing that Linda Shield always shares with us is that if we put extra X days anywhere in our calendar, it affects our classified employees. And so we have limited them to kind of where they are right now. I guess technically we could move some of our holiday days even because the actual holidays fall on Saturdays and Sundays. So those could be moved, but if we incorporate them into the X days, then that also helps our classified staff. The other days that we put our Ps and our FLs, because those days don't have to be worked, they are flex in a way or waived in some schools for the P days. We put them basically once a month so that it creates a 3-day weekend for both kids and teachers to kind of have a break. At the time we started doing that, everybody called it the dreadful March. And so we kind of made the calendar so that you had a break, at least one a month scattered throughout. We tried to make them not all on Mondays or not all on Fridays, because schedules that have A days and B days, and they call them red days and blue days, all kinds of stuff. We do that so that if we aren't always missing the same days.
Mrs. Shield, did you want to say anything about that? We do appreciate you being here to give us guidance on that.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. I did look at the X day placement, and I think that will work very well for the classified staff. Otherwise, I believe this calendar could work.
Thank you, Linda. So what I want to do is I want to open it up to the committee for questions and for suggestions. You know, let's just open it up. I will start by giving you one other alternative that was presented to me, and then I'm going to ask maybe the principals to talk a little bit about it. You know, providing professional learning for teachers and also time to do professional learning communities has been a challenge. It really is. Frankly, teachers don't get enough time. It's just not enough time. So one of the options that we've been discussing for a couple of years that we should put on the table here is the idea of an early release day. Do one of the principals want to talk about what that option might look like?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in and talk about that. The elementary principals are really in favor of having some early release days, just for that main reason of having PLCs. That would also allow us to include our classified staff. And if we were able to space them throughout the year, it really gives us an opportunity to address instructional needs when they need to be done. When we put all the PD days at the beginning of the year, oftentimes things come up throughout the school year, and then it becomes very difficult to fit in either additional professional learning, especially for our classified staff, because I think it's important to honor their instructional needs as well, since they are an integral part of what we do. By spacing those early release days out, it does give us a better opportunity to address things that come up throughout the school year and to address student needs as well.
Thank you, Kim. So obviously, you know, time is finite, or the days that we have are finite. It's 187 contractual days, or 185. What did you say, Mike? Which one was it? 187,
Dr. Detweiler.
187.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if we were to do something like early release days, we'd have to figure out the timing of all that and how it fits into the calendar. I guess I would also like to hear from the parents and the board members actually on that concept. You know, that's an impact to the community, because then we'd ask our parents, especially at the elementary level, to be sure that somebody needed to be home for those children when they were sent home early. So how does an idea like that sit with the parents and with the board members?
Well, I mean, for me, I mean, I have older high schoolers, so it's not a big deal. But you know, I'm going to rely on the parents here that if they have anybody that's younger, you know, we have comparatively how many students in the elementary, middle versus high school.
And how many early release days are we speaking about? I mean, would it be something where the high school students can go over and watch the elementary and middle school students?
Yeah, so Kim Best, did you have an idea of how many? Probably would be, if we're talking about early release, it's at least twice as many PD days as we have listed, because it'd be half days practically,
Right.
pretty much.
We had kind of talked around the idea of maybe having one a quarter, so one half day a quarter. So it would equate to just 2 PD days total, 4 half days. And if we were able to put one in each quarter, that would give us the opportunity to really timely address some things. Now, I know in other districts that this works fairly well. The first year, you know, it is a little bit of a pressure point, but then once it becomes part of the norm, and it's just planned into the calendar, it does seem to work for those districts. It's just expected.
Yeah, I guess if there's ever a silver lining for what we've been through this past year, we know that our families have been extremely flexible, and we've been really appreciative of that. You know, something like that they know up front in advance, because it's on the calendar, is probably something they would be able to plan for.
How does that work into the extension of the calendar if we still have to get that educational time in? How does that play into it?
May I, Dr. Detweiler?
Yes, please.
Dr. Brown, according to the statute, anytime that a child walks into the building, that's considered an instructional day. It does not qualify any longer that it has to be a 6-hour day. So if we were to utilize half days for the type of conversation that Ms. Best has mentioned, then we would still get the 170 days, even if the children are only in the school for half a day. The component that we would need to calculate and figure out before we would take this calendar to the board is to ensure that we get the 1,062 minimum hours of instruction, taking those 3 hours away 4 times a year. So that would be the element or the variable that we would have to watch very closely. So there would not be a problem meeting the 170-day requirement for student instructional days as outlined in statute, but we would have to calculate very closely the impact on the required 1,062 hours of instruction. And we would not send a calendar to the board that did not meet both requirements and then some. So I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
Is there any historical data to look at high school absenteeism when we look at half days? Because I'm thinking about my 2 kids in high school. I'm only going to miss 3 hours of instruction. Who cares? I don't know if this is something that other districts that do this have run into.
That's a really good question. That's something that I can explore this week, try to find an answer to. I think we would want to look at that data for sure. I'm curious to hear from the teachers, Ryan, Mary, Bobby. You know, how do you think the association or the teachers in the district would respond to something like this?
I have 2 questions in that, and I know other people do it, but I don't know the answers. So how does that fall in with Ignite? If we are doing it and Kenton County is not, what kind of problems are we going to have there? And then lunch, because I know that, you know, if you cut out a 3-hour day, you do have to do something with lunch. I guess we could do something in the way that we do now in packing, but I don't know what other schools do in those instances about lunch.
Yes, Bobby, I can explore the lunch. In terms of Ignite, and I'm glad you brought Ignite up. As you know, we do share students or share a building, share a program with Kenton County. We also have students from Walton Verona, and we'll be adding students from Dunkirk probably this coming year too. So we do have to be cognizant of those other calendars. I know that I'm not sure how the early release would impact that building, but that's something I can ask Bill Hogan, who is our liaison for Ignite, our director of innovative programming, to take a look at that to see what that might look like or how that would impact them. That's a good question.
I'm thinking about bus routes too. Because all the kindergarten and preschool bus routes are running at the half-day mark. So I'm not sure if that has been a problem in the past.
Good question, Linda. I'll add that to my list.
We're one of the only schools that still do half-day kindergarten, so that might affect us more than it would other districts that are doing that.
Right.
I don't know, as far as, teachers are concerned, I'm sure you'll get some that love it and some that don't love it so much. I guess it's maybe worth a try. We take 2 of those days and split them up. I don't know. It's iffy.
Yeah, I do like that's kind of what I was thinking too. It's not all or nothing. We could use this as a year to try it, to do a pilot with 1 or 2 of them possibly. I do like what Kim Best also said at the beginning, that because our district is becoming more reliant on the PLC, professional learning communities, it does allow for frequent PLCs and extended time for teachers to do that. So it's something that I think we should look at. Ryan Dittmer, do you think that the teachers will just respond favorably to this, just from your experience?
I think they would like it. I know that in a previous district I worked for, 16 years ago or whatever, we did have early release days, and being able to meet with the team was beneficial. And I think they, used the time wisely. So my only question with that would be, if we take any of those, our yellow blocked PD days and moved those during those early releases during our regular contracted hours. So would that be double dipping? I don't know if I'm saying it clearly or not, but.
Say it again, try again.
So if you're one of the PDs that we have that are already, whatever we have right now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 at the beginning of the school year. And if you're going to take 2 of those and move them to half days, well, we're already scheduled to work those times that we're moving them to. It's already our contracted hours. Mm-hmm. Would we be allowed to do that?
Then we're going to go with no.
That's the thing. We'd still have to, because somebody mentioned moving some of those days or splitting those days up, but that's additional. That wouldn't meet our 187 required days for faculty.
They don't have to be PD days. They can go back and be student days.
Well, that's true too.
We just do 73 and 74, but that would have the kids ending on the 23rd on a Monday. I don't see that happening, so it's a little iffy there.
Yeah, we would have to refigure the calendar. That is true.
Jim, the other point, and I know Kim Best could speak to this too, but I'm interested to know of our schools and teachers, this, a lot of times principals designate SBDM dollars for half-day subs frequently throughout the year. So it would end up being a cost savings, I would imagine, to school councils if they had a day built in, 1 day maybe each quarter, to Kim's point, or semester. Kim, are you guys still doing that?
We were up until recently. So
there are no subs. Yeah.
There are no subs anymore. So it is definitely a challenge. And obviously with, reductions in budgets pretty much everywhere. And if we can avoid doing that, we do, but it has become a detriment to not being able to do everything we want to do instructionally, just because it is such a huge expense to have a half-day sub.
Am I right that this is more of an elementary concern than it is either middle or high school? Because I know that, my PLC meets weekly. We have the time to do that, and it's a lot harder for an elementary school to do. But it could also be hard for a high school to do because their schedules aren't, like, all language arts teachers are not off at the same time. So they might have trouble too. I'm not familiar with high school.
Yeah, Mr. Wilson, do you want to address that? What are your thoughts?
Sure. Yeah, so we have PLC time, but it's not all if we're example of English, it's not all English. It's by subject area. So English 1 has a PLC dedicated time, then English 2 a different period, but not the whole group. Even with that built-in time that we have, I see the benefits. 2 key words for us that stick out would be timely PD throughout the school year, and inclusive, that it would also, include our classified staff, which increasingly needs more and more training at various times. So those two things I think are essential and important, and would, I think, have the high school principals on board for the early release.
Okay, great.
How
Would
do
it
you
be possible-
imagine sequencing this so that you look at content? You know, I would hate to, I'm thinking about me from a heavy content instruction. If you try to take 4 hours from me in a year, I might arm wrestle you for it, because wow, that could be a lot of content. So how do we envision sequencing that out so that students who are on blocks or students who are on semesters aren't missing the same core content repeatedly throughout the year?
Yeah, because at the elementary school, they could reconfigure their schedules so that didn't happen. But you're right, at the high school and middle school where those are locked in, that could be an issue.
We reconfigure ours all the time. We would probably just shorten the days or shorten the hour of the class.
Okay.
So do you envision, I guess, Ms. Best, do you envision being this in an elementary kind of thing, that the art teachers or the music teachers can meet in a cluster or as a group then also?
Yeah, that's one of the things that we find as a huge benefit as well, because a lot of our, I hate to call them singletons, but single content teachers, you know, especially at elementary, it's very difficult for them to collaborate, and they will speak highly that, you know, that is where they get their best professional learning, is on those opportunities, you know, that they can come together across the district. You know, we have common planning for all of our teachers here, but you know, my art teacher doesn't have common planning with the other 13 art teachers at the elementary level. So being able to pull them all together at the same time would be a huge benefit. It also allows our content teachers to collaborate with their special area teachers, you know, in an easier way than if they're doing now. So it does open that up. It also opens it up to some targeted training, you know, when we're looking at our EL teachers or special education teachers or our specialized unit teachers. That's another area that, you know, those teachers really need that additional time to work together across the district. And it's very difficult for them to do that outside of having, you know, outside of work trainings for them.
If it's something that's planned so far and ahead, is it something that the teachers could plan like an NTI day? So rather than having an early release, have the kids at home all day and they're still receiving instruction through video and through assignments and things like that, versus a half day?
I think that would be hard on the parents. Again, a lot of these parents are really stretched now. If we do these half days, I would suggest if it's once a quarter, can it be Veterans Day? Can it be President's Day? Can it be some of those days where maybe the parents aren't working anyway that day? And then maybe the elementary schools can work on older schools coming over for service hours and watching the kids that cannot be picked up. That's just me. Again, I have kids that are in high school and in college, but I'm just thinking about those elementary school parents.
Yeah, and not all the high schools have elementary or middle schools on their campus to start with. So, you know, like I'm looking at Boone and there's no other school.
Those are all good suggestions. And I think going back, Jenny, your original question, the NTI days, I believe, and we are new to this, the intent would be to only use those, you know, for weather-related circumstances when we get out of this pandemic situation. You know, it is a good tool. It's a great tool, but I'm not sure about building it in for PLCs. But it's something we can look at that with all the other suggestions as well. Okay, I want to honor everybody's time. So I think what are some last comments you have on this particular issue? I think what I've heard so far, I've been taking some notes, and this is my homework for the week until we meet again. We'll talk about that. We want to look at historic data from other high schools that have tried this, see how this impacts their attendance, see how this might impact Ignite, lunch schedules, bus routes, unified arts, as Kim was describing, it's a benefit for them as well. Mike's also saying that it's timely and inclusive, which is a positive. We can talk more about that. And then some suggestions that we look at Veterans Day and some days when parents are already home if we're going to try this. And then also, obviously, what we just talked about, the NTI days, how that might impact or help if possible. So I can take that list and do some homework. Anything else we want to look at on that topic? Okay, what are some other things within the calendar that you see that you have questions about? Holidays, start and end dates, opening day, any of those dates on here that you want to discuss more or look at alternatives?
I have one thing.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, the only thing just from years experience and holding the election to waive days and things like that, we pretty much always move a professional day before opening day to do medical trainings or a back to school fest or things like that that we can't count as PD. We mostly always waive something for professional. So has that been thought about doing?
Yeah, I'm going to let Jenny Watson talk about this. We talked about this very thing this afternoon. Jenny, do you want to talk about some of the ideas, how we interpret PD days, and maybe we can interpret them a little bit differently?
Hey, Ryan, I think that's a great question. And I think so much of it is the language in the contract and basically what is the difference between a PD day by the language of the contract versus a P day with the language of the contract. So basically, just from my memory, I don't have the contract in front of me, but PD days, professional development usually is more formal. Usually it's more holistic. It's more, specific to, educational practice, pedagogy, curriculum, something along that lines. Those P days, there's more flexibility there. And I think under P days contract, Mary Wilson, check me on this. I think there's 2 bullet points under it. One is a P day can be parent engagement or parent teacher conferences or something like that. Or a P day can convert to be a professional development use. Mary, am I right on that? Or Bobby? Anybody have the contract in front of them? I thought that wasn't my assignment, but I will pull it right off the shelf. But anyway, so Ryan,
the P day, I'm sorry, that was also a day where we graded portfolios so many moons ago. So that P day has changed. It has generally been parent-teacher conferences, parent engagement. It is a little more, flexible than a PD day is, but then a PD can be used for those things. It's just typically always more of that, like you said, the pedagogy part of it and actual learning about your content and stuff. But that one can be used other ways, and we talked about that today.
So Ryan, to your point, if there was a need, if that would something like those medical trainings, PBIS, all of those state and local requirements, if that could be sufficient to fall under PD, there would be no need to waive. Would that meet the need? I guess that's my, it's that interpretation of PD versus P that gets confusing, that I think Mary Wilson knows this, but I think we need to revisit that as a whole contract negotiation, the language in there, because all that portfolio stuff doesn't need to be relevant. It's not relevant anymore. That's in the contract. So I don't think I answered your question, but I get where you're coming from. It's just the interpretation of P days and PD days.
Yeah, because traditionally we've been kind of voting and saying that you can't do those kind of more tasks on PD days. You have to do those on a professional day. It's what we've been going with in years past. But I mean, personally, if you're doing those trainings and things online, you're learning something. You're supposed to be learning something about the medical administration. You're supposed to be learning about. So, I guess it is up into interpretation. I was just trying to say, it's just one less thing to vote on and approve, and have to go through if it's already there. Is my only thing. Just try to make things even easier.
Amen. That's a good point, Ryan. I think because in this calendar we would be adding 3 PD days, it would provide us with more flexibility on what we can do. Like you said, that is learning. When we're online, we are learning, and I'm sure there are other things during the day that the principals would be scheduling as well. So I think that's a good point.
So the idea, Ryan, and I would suggest maybe P day if people waive PD days, it's more in the lines of parent engagement, parent-teacher conferences,
Okay.
or a plain professional day. And that's what we've been conversing about.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? Usually we have a conversation about the December break. No one's brought that up. Did you see how long that December break is on there? If you add the weekends, wow, that's a nice break. Any comments about that?
I don't think it's any longer than any other year. I'm just looking.
Just roll with me, Mike. Just roll with me, Mike. I'm just trying to get some conversation going here.
Jim, that's why there's no comment, because it's nice and long.
Nice and long, everybody. Yeah, right.
We're all in agreement on that.
Too long. Take some days out.
Yeah, it's too long.
What? You guys need a vacation? I really don't struggle with this as a parent. I'm just telling you right now.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, no.
The only
Okay.
other day I've seen systemically come up, and I don't honestly know what day it would be in here, would be the day after the Super Bowl. I've heard that come up before in calendar committees
It's true.
as a
It
really
has.
historically low attendance day, but I honestly don't know when that is.
Is that,
And
It's usually the 7th or the 14th. It just depends. But we only did that one time and we got all kinds of feedback on how awful it was because we didn't take Veterans Day and we took the day after. We didn't take President's Day. I can't remember which one it was, but we were off the day after. And the only reason we did it is because at the point in time, there was somebody on the committee, and I believe it might have been Matt Turner, that wanted to, he wanted to have his meetings for the next term or something like that. They always do scheduling kinds of things for the next year during that time. And that was a day that they could do it. And so we put a P day or a FL, it's the one in February. We moved it to that position instead of the 21st where it is, which I'm assuming is President's Day. So we moved it one time and got all kinds of flack. And so it's been put back on President's Day where it belongs.
Bobby, you're
I think-
exactly right.
I think you're hedging your bet too that the Bengals probably won't make the Super Bowl at that time, so it's probably not a big thing for this area.
Oh, don't get me started. Steelers fan here. I'm sorry. Don't get me going.
We still have hope.
Okay, we're getting way off track. I'm not doing my job here as the chairperson. Okay, so that takes care of the holidays. It takes care of the day after Super Bowl. What other dates do you have on the calendar that you have questions about or that we should discuss?
someone did bring up a good point when they mentioned the NTI. Is that something as a district that has been decided? I know this model, I can't see the bottom of it, but we usually have anticipated snow days. Moving forward, has there been discussion about how those will be handled and whether those will be days off versus NTI? How does this calendar reflect that?
So we have told the principals that moving forward for any inclement weather that they will be NTI days to avoid calling school off to make them up later. So in fact, we just told them that this past week, Jenny, or week before that.
My kids won't be happy with that.
I know it's not a real popular thing to say online, probably.
Dr. Detweiler, can I add one comment to that
Yes,
about the NTI
please.
days?
Yes.
Dr. Brown, for this current year, we are already under an executive order issued by the governor where we have unlimited NTI days because of the pandemic. That hasn't been done as of yet for next school year. We would need another executive order. I'm just quoting statute at this point for the number of NTI days. Technically, once a district is approved for NTI days, you only get 10 of them. And unless the governor issues an executive order moving forward to make it unlimited. So not trying to steal anyone's thunder, just knowing the statute. For this calendar that you see in front of you, we would have to be cautious currently that we would only be able to work 10 NTI days into this calendar unless Governor Beshear, for whatever reason, of course, the last 2 years have been because of the pandemic, would go into executive order and increase the number of NTI days that the district could use. That's just a reminder for the committee. That's all. I just want to share that as a reminder. That's what it would take. Thank you for allowing me to.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
Dr. Detweiler, is the spring break always, or seems to be normally the second week of April? Is there a reason that it's always that week and not the first week, or even the third week? Or are we trying to match it up with other districts, or what is the thought just having it at that point in time always?
I'm going to defer to Mike and Bobby on that. They've been, as we said, they have helped us develop this calendar for years. What is the reasoning behind that?
I could say that the spring break falls wherever Bobby wants it.
Hey now.
Not
Oh,
true.
come on, I'm not sorry, I'm kidding. Okay.
I know, it's okay.
I'll-
It is currently, sorry about that, it is currently that week because KEA days are the 7th and 8th.
Before.
That 2 days before spring break, that's why it's not on that first week of April. The other things that happen is I believe, it has to do with Easter a lot too, and that's why it's pushed back a week later than normal.
The 15th is Good Friday,
Yes.
and which means Easter falls on the 17th. So for all of those reasons, Bobby talked about the KEA days and where the Easter break falls in, so that we can, as a district, recognize those families that want to participate in Good Friday services, et cetera. We're being respectful to them. So for all of those reasons, Troy, that's why it was placed where it's placed there. And I was just kidding with Bobby. Bobby knows I was just kidding about that.
I do, it's fine.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure that'll match up with whatever Kenton County decides to do also, because they follow those same guidelines that we do in that.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Mr. Turner's teaching me to have long wait time. Give people time to process.
In the social work world, you're just waiting for someone else to speak. Giving more info.
Giving more input. Okay, well, if there are no other comments for tonight, what I would like to do is, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we will need a second meeting. We're looking at next Monday. I think you were asked to keep next Monday open. If we could still do that, that would be great. I know that there's a 6:30 redistricting meeting, so we would like to probably have this meeting a little bit earlier than we did, maybe 5 p.m. Or would you like to do 5:30, Mike?
No, no, just I may have to excuse myself
I know.
A little
You're
early,
doing
but the 5 o'clock would work much better. Thank you very much for considering and taking that into consideration. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, Mike, those are two big meetings for Mike on one night. Would 5 o'clock on that 23rd work for everyone? You know, Mike, would you mind unsharing your screen so I can see everybody's thumbs up or thumbs down?
Jim, Bobby, and I and Ryan have a meeting at 5 o'clock next Monday night.
Okay, so that won't work. I'm going to throw out, I'm just going to start throwing out some dates then. How about, I know this is right before our break, but what about Tuesday evening at 5:30?
Yeah, that'll work.
Will that work for everybody? Thumbs up. All right, I think everybody is on board for that. So we will set that date and send you a calendar invite. We'll do our homework to investigate what we need to investigate in terms of early release days. We will, if that looks like it's a possibility, I have to talk to Mr. Turner to see if that is indeed something he wants to pursue. We'll reconfigure another draft and bring it back to the group. And other than that, really appreciate your time. Any closing comments? All right, thank you for your time, everybody. Have a good evening. We'll talk to you next week. Meeting adjourned at 6:11.